Skipster is the guest management platform used by top event teams for everything from guest lists to seating charts and online invitations. If you're looking for next generation event software that helps deliver perfect guest experiences, head over to Skipster's website. It's Skipster, ZKIPSTER.com to try a free event.
Are you a
9, 8,
Okay, so we're gonna be
Welcome to GatherGeeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here are your hosts, BizBash CEO David Adler and Editor-in-Chief Beth Kormanik.
Welcome to GatherGeeks. David is away. Our guest is Andy Kushner, the CEO and founder of the music and entertainment company Kushner Entertainment. He's also the host of the podcast, The Wedding Biz. Kushner is going to talk about both roles. First, he discusses his podcast and shares his philosophy on booking guests and what he achieves through that format. From the entertainment side, he shares his thoughts on the state of live music in the event industry, as well as current trends, including why a song like Uptown Funk and hits from Earth, Wind & Fire are still popular songs on playlists. He also discusses how industry vendors can help shape the event experiences rather than simply just provide a service. Let's listen.
So here we are with Andy Kushner. We're doing what we call this a collaboration.
That's right.
All the young kids are doing it. It's kind of hip, right?
David, we're so cool.
We're so cool.
We are.
So I was on your wedding podcast. Tell us a little bit about that. It came out last week.
Yeah,
and
well, just
you're
last
here this
Monday.
week.
Well, at the time people hear this, just search for it, David Adler. But man, David, you were great. That was such a great interview. But yeah, so the podcast I have is called The Wedding Biz, although really it covers the entire event industry. Because many people who are doing weddings are doing everything else, and I'd like to get into it all. But basically, I take a very deep dive into mostly who I consider icons of the business. You know, the Mindy Weisses and Marcy Bloom and David Starr, Colin Cowie, those type of people. And find out a lot about, you know, who are they? Where did this come from with them? And because it really informs, obviously, who they are today.
Okay, so let's start with that.
Sure.
I want to understand, you decided to go into the podcast business, but you really have an entertainment company. And a lot of the strategies over the past has been to use some sort of media outlet to create authority. And then it does more for your business. And you're seeing a lot of people in the wedding space do this, but you seem to be sort of numero uno now, it seems like.
Well, I mean, thanks for saying that. But yeah, I really want to take this in a big way. Like I'm just about to be launching a network. Actually, it's a big announcement I haven't even said on my own show, in which we produce shows for other people who are fairly high level already. And so, you know, podcasts in general are basically a marketing tool to sell products and services. It's funny, Dave, because when I first got in, I thought that was it in of itself, you know, but it really is the way to look at a podcast. It's a marketing tool, but the whole purpose.
I disagree with that. Can I push back on that?
Well, I was about to say what else I like to do, but go for it.
Well, no, the idea is that I do believe that it's a great medium to peek over the fence and hear what other people are listen over the fence, I guess, is the great way to see what other people are doing in an unedited fashion. And so, yes, it's marketing, but it's that kind of marketing that you trust because you hear the rationale behind it and you can put your BS meter on.
That's
and
right.
you can figure out what's going on. But you didn't start in the podcasting world. Tell us your origin story.
Sure. Well, I started, as you said, the main business that I have right now that I've had for decades is Kushner Entertainment, which is a music and entertainment company. And I mean, the bug hit me when I was 6. You know, music, I knew in 6, 7, especially at 9 when I discovered trumpet. I started a band at 15, and we did really well. This is in Tampa, Florida. We played at Tampa Stadium for the professional soccer team, the Rowdies, who were champions when we were there. We'd played before the game, halftime, and after for thousands of people, and we're just teenagers. And it was my band. It was a really good band, and so I knew that ultimately that's really what I want to do. However, I was scared, and so I ended up getting a business degree at Boston University. And to make a long story short, I got out and started selling for IBM out of Boston. They trained me for 9 months. It was the last big iconic sales training for IBM that people, knew a lot about. They moved me to Washington, D.C. for my first territory. And I basically was with IBM for 8 years, and then a division that spun out called Lexmark, the printers, for 8 years. So for 16 years, I sold and then eventually found, trained, signed up business partners. So I learned a lot about branding and how companies work and mission statements and the business of business. And halfway through that, 8 years into the corporate career, I started this band called Sound Connection, which still exists, of course, with younger people. And very quickly, Sound Connection became a major event act for weddings, corporate parties, and flying all over the world. I started a second band, a third band, and I just couldn't be in a corporate environment anymore. So again, very long story, but I left it and went full time with the music company. Kushner
But with the music company, was you're promoting your own bands at that moment, right?
Yes. For the most part, it's because I, especially back then, had a unique approach, which was not just to get a lot of quantity. I didn't want to be a volume-based business and just roll out band after band and video after video, but rather consider music as a tool to create an experience for whatever kind of an event. And back then, that was pretty unique. And so I would only do it with my own acts because they had to be trained in a certain way to be able to understand it's all about the client, and we're going to be different it's going to be custom-based experience.
Okay, so everyone says that. It's all about the client.
Good
and all
point.
about
People do say that.
What made what you did stand out from the crowd?
Well, I think again now, there's the market's so saturated. There's more competition. There's a lot of good acts out there too, and there's a lot of good people, some of whom I've had on my own podcast. On the podcast, I don't have a competitive spirit about it. So I've had some really great people, who are doing a lot of great work out there. But back then, we're talking in the early 90s, as far as I knew, it was really unusual to have that approach to music and entertainment. And therefore, we were able to start breaking out of the DC area and get hired for very big events.
So take us into one of your acts. And what was the excitement? I believe that we're in the Maya Angelou business, that people don't hear what you said. They only want to know how you made them feel.
I love that quote.
So I think it's become the through line with everything we do, I think.
Yeah.
And so what was it at your event? Was it music in general, or did you have a sort of a little twist that made it an Andy Kushner approach?
I think the twist, and again, some more people are doing
Spill
it
your secrets,
now.
in other words.
Well, I don't know that's a big secret now anymore. I approached it like basically an event designer, an event planner, where I'm going to really get to know the clients and not just say, oh, you want a band? What is it? A wedding, a corporate party, a holiday party? Oh, here's 6 videos and here's the pricing, and just hope they hire something. No, I wanted to meet with the clients, if possible, in person, at least over the phone, and the ones who are willing to do this, and really, like a consultant, find out, even if it's a wedding, it doesn't matter. And for corporate, what is the purpose of this event? What is it you want out of it? What do you want people to feel?
Okay, so what did, in doing that analysis, was there a through line in that sort of made it sort of that you can do your business, make money from your business, and serve them with what they wanted because you've already kind of knew what they wanted?
Well, look, the bottom line is, they all say often in the beginning a lot of the same thing. We just want everyone to have a great time.
Right. But
I'll try to summarize this example. I recently had a call from a company who's having a holiday party in December, kind of a high-tech company, project-based company, and they gave me a budget, some number of dollars. They wanted a good band, but I saw in the information, the lead, for a 70th anniversary party. So right away I thought, this is an opportunity, and so I convinced them to get together in person. I had the event director and their marketing director, which was interesting. And I spent 45 minutes just asking them questions, just finding out what is their brand message, and what do they want, not just out of the party, but in general for the company. And eventually it led to them telling me that the CEO not only wants people to have fun, but like very seriously, it's a big goal is to have them have fun in general at the company, not just the holiday party, And also they have all these projects. They want the employees. He wants the employees to be aware of what each other's doing and have this kind of shared, thing going on. And so instead of just having a band for a holiday party, I pitched this idea, this concept of, they also told me they're big in social media. They love that. So I said, well, I have an idea. I'm going to create this experience that starts even before the party, a month early. And then that night is real big, and then it moves on. And there's a lot to this, but for the sake of right now, most of it is based on that they have 1,500 people coming, I found out. And out of 1,500, I figured there's going to be some great singers and instrumentalists out of 1,500 people. And there's the whole concept of America's Got Talent and American Idol. So I'm going to do, Company Idol, the name of their company, basically, and create a Facebook page just for this. And ahead of time, I'm giving out an idea here, but I don't care. We should all share. And I'm going to put out to them that we can have people audition from the company and let everyone know this is happening. We narrow it down to 3 finalists. Then we do a whole thing. We dress them up, and throughout the night, every 20 minutes, because I also believe an event should unfold and have surprises, and basically have each of these 3 finalists perform and have the crowd vote in the moment. And, then there's this whole thing going on. There's a lot more to it. But the point is, they thought that all they wanted was a band to have fun. And instead, how can I support what they really want in a deeper way?
It's interesting that you're saying that, because I just got back from the global event forum with Aaliyah example in Minneapolis, and it turned out that the biggest issue that the whole industry seems to have is having vendors become more strategic about the way they think of whatever they do. If you're a florist, how do you make that better? If you are in the music business, you're giving an example of how to do that. If you're the planner, how do you be more strategic? How do you get a seat at the table that you can actually ask if the CEO has these objectives? Because usually you don't know, and by asking lots of questions you do. So you have to be analytical. And I guess a lot of your business background allowed you to learn how to do that. It
does. Well, and I apply it to the podcast too, the Wedding Biz. I apply it there too, in terms of really wanting to take a deep dive into who are they, how does it manifest in terms of their brand, so that they can basically do better, whether it's internally a message within the company or whether it's to the public, an image that they want to portray.
So how do you describe that? Like, one of the issues that everyone has is, how do you explain what being strategic is? You did it in what you talked about here, but how do you explain it to the other people that are maybe listening?
I don't know if I'm being too simplistic, but if it's not, I'm going to say, first of all, what's not strategic is treating your service or your product like a can of soup. Here, like, I'll stick with bands. Here's 6 bands. They're all really great. Here's the price range. What do you want? And then the band shows up, does what they do every week. No, to me, being strategic is getting more information. It's classic sales, really. It's finding out the person you're sitting in front of, what is it that really matters to them and what doesn't matter too. I think that's really important to find too. And again, any event planner knows who's good. It knows what I'm talking about. Why wouldn't the quote unquote vendors, I hate that term. I want everyone to change it to creative partners. No more vendors. Let's call them creative partners. But why wouldn't the creative partners treat their product, their service in the same manner?
Well, let's go up and down the line, because even the person internally at a company have their clients that they need to make sure that they're serving. And
That's
then the C-suite people have their clients, which are their customers, their end customers.
Yeah.
So understanding this up and down the ladder makes sense. And also the one thing about that you do, and which I started doing, is that I believe music has got this special quality to it that is not necessarily just about having fun, but the neuroscience of it and the idea that it raises the energy levels in a room. And live music is actually even more powerful than tape. I'm using the word tape in the broadest sense. What is your thought on that?
No, I agree. There's the emotional element of music. It is so impactful, right? We call music the international language. And, I did a job with one of my bands, Sound Connection, in Singapore, where it was not people from 9 different countries. No one spoke English. And yet it was the music that emotionally got them so riled up, so bonded together. That's what that particular client wanted, was how do I bring these different cultures together in one night who don't speak a common language, and it's the emotion of music, and you could see it on their faces, and they all start interacting. And so, yeah, it's when you talk about neuroscience, I believe in that too. And there's very subtle ways that we don't even fully understand how it affects people, and can take, again, a brand message or a wedding, whatever it is, and complement it.
I believe, I do now I have a live band. We use 45 Riot for the last year, who are on stage with me at all my conferences, because the idea of having the walk-in music and having all this stuff in live, that the person can react, the music, the band can react, the speaker can react, the audience can react, and it adds a completely different element to everything.
It also gets them excited.
Yeah.
Literally, and in ways they don't understand, so that, again, I'm being very strategic with this, where whatever the point of the meeting is, the opening general session, the talks, the motivational speakers, whatever, get in there even quicker and more effectively, because people are like loose, in a sense. Loosen isn't the right word, really, but they're engaged. All their senses are engaged from this impact that walking in the room, like you said, there's a live music. And if you can incorporate some live music in some ways throughout the event, it keeps it going, builds. You take them on a journey.
And it does work.
Yes.
And what do you think is the state of live music now, from what you're seeing in the industry? Is it the DJ versus the live? Well, is there a controversy around that anymore?
Look, there are wonderful DJs out there who can do a great job. However, and I have great DJs, and I'm supportive of it. However, like you said earlier, live music, there's something magical about it that cannot be. It just can't be communicated in the same way as some kind of recorded music. I mean, definitely recorded music has an impact for sure, but live music, and for years, it looked overall in the industry like it was going more and more to DJs. And now, one thing I think about is that really younger people who have not grown up to bands, it's more, these single solo artists, and it's not as much the live band like back in the day. Aerosmith and Chicago and Sly and the Family Stone, Earth, Wind and Fire, all those groups, Fleetwood Mac. There's not as much of that anymore, and yet it does seem like there's a resurgence going on with live music, and maybe it's because of how some of us are incorporating it in a different way now in events. It is very impactful.
Building a memorable experience for your guest means planning every detail right. Skipster is the guest management platform designed to help you create the perfect experience, from impressive online invitations to seamless check-in at the door. Get started at Skipster, spelled ZKIPSTER.com, for a free test event. Okay, so let's take us to present day, real time. You get a call. Like, what are people asking for today? Like, what is any through line in that?
As far as
when they're doing an event, and you're not being that. Before you're strategic, you want to hear what their requests are. What's the high level sort of need in terms of types of music, or is there anything?
To me, it's almost like the example I gave you, where they contacted me for a band for the holiday party, period, or let's say a multi-day incentive program. We've done a lot of those where it's 3 nights, 4 nights, and on the last night, it's a gala and they want a live band. So most of the time, that's what they're calling. They're not necessarily aware, until they're educated about it, how else it can be used in different ways in other aspects of the event.
So you're curating an entire experience.
I love that word, curating. Yes, curating an entire experience. It's totally experiential.
And they're turning to you for that, for the most part. And that's. But what is there sort of an age differentiation between the different? If you do multi-generation, what do you do for multi-generation?
Yeah, and that's a challenge, especially at weddings. I mean, all corporations somewhat, but especially a wedding. That's where you're dealing with, who knows, whatever. Let's say teenagers to people in their 80s. And so another aspect of that is, which is what I love about the acts I have, is the front line of singers, for example, are really responsible to connect with the crowd. And there's wonderful acts out there, wonderful bands that perform, and they'll be great, but they're not necessarily connecting with the crowd.
Okay, so how you were on the front line. How do you read a crowd? How does the band read a crowd?
I was on the front line.
Yeah, you were. Now you're
for
like,
a long time.
Yeah, but you know the feeling.
But how do they read the crowd?
Yeah, how do they read the crowd?
You know,
like, what is it
that's
the magic?
Skill. It's a skill that has to be developed. I think there's a certain intuitiveness to that.
Well, you know, if no one's dancing, you got to do something.
Well, yeah, but also there is a way, like I do sit down with any new singer that I bring in, especially as we develop leaders and things like that. I do sit down with them and talk a lot about, there are some techniques to reading a crowd, but it's also just making them aware that that's what my business, that's what this is about. You know, are you interested to come into this? And I find that a lot of them end up loving it because they're connecting with people. Yeah. They feel more. Yes, it's fun to be up on stage and just perform. I mean, and I got a lot out of that, and I feel that in a sense. I mean, now I'm speaking a lot at corporations, and so you know, I love that aspect of performance. However, for these front singers to actually, you know, interact with the crowd, not in a cheesy way, but to feel it. It has that has a subtle impact.
Do you think that people are, I mean, there's certain, like the wedding band had a reputation for a long time that seems to be changing. Right?
Yeah, and not always a good reputation.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
exactly.
It's associated with being cheesy.
Yeah, how do you get over cheesy? How do you convince the smart client that you're not going to get the cheesiness of a wedding band type of thing? What do you do? What is the difference? What is cheesy?
Well, part of it, I mean,
that's a big question of the universe.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of technicalities in terms of how the bands dress and present themselves. Yeah. And so there can be cheese, if we call it that word, in terms of how they're dressing and even how they kind of move on stage, and that certain songs, you know, that these days don't necessarily go over as well. So I like to have the acts reflect it. Well, look, they have to reflect for different demographics. They've got to handle the 70s, the 80s, and 90s current, but they got to have a current element and an edge. See, that's one thing I'm so excited about now. Well, let's talk about a couple decades ago. People were intimidated, especially weddings, by a band that was really a kick-ass, hot, edgy band. They were like, "Oh no, we don't want a show," you know. And I was sometimes I'd have to explain, because some of the jobs we did, the news would get out like, "Oh, we don't want a band that did Bellagio in Las Vegas. This is just for." And I would have to explain to them, no. They bring that experience and they connect. It's different. It's an intimate party. Nowadays, I believe that because of how people are so much more aware from TV, the Emmys, the Grammys, and everything, they now want what they see and hear. They want that edge.
So what is the anti-cheesy thing that...
Well, it's being an act.
It's
an act that's like a celebrity act, only they're there at your event and they're connecting with you really, what feels like in an really cool way, direct way.
Was the cheese of the past the uncheesy today? Like when you have a retro cheesy band, it's kind of cool.
Well, and yeah, sometimes, I mean, look, if that's what they want, and I'm not saying that an 80s act is cheesy when I say this, but maybe they just want a total 80s thing. The look of it, the songs, you know, even move on stage the way they moved in the videos. You know, if a band that's doing a whole variety of material does that, it's considered cheesy. But if it's a theme kind of an event and they want that, then great.
And so, what is there any sort of request that has sort of stumped the band, literally, or is there odd requests that you're getting?
Not really, and I'll tell you why. So again, back then there were certain songs that were just staples at any event, and nowadays, again, people really want different. They want to be different, and we'll get requests for songs like a typical song. What is it? I just looked at this morning for somebody's event, "Basket Case" by Green Day. Now, I know people will respond to that, but we don't necessarily get requests for it. This particular client requested that song. It's not something that one of my other bands, Rhythm 6, plays all the time, but I know it's going to kill at the party. I know it.
What are your top 2 or 3 numbers that?
Well, I mean, it changes. It's based on the number one hits, right? I mean, like for example, even still, Uptown Funk, which was a number one hit for a while for Bruno Mars, is still big. So still these number one, number two hits that have the right tempo, right? Because there's a lot of mid-tempo stuff these days, and you know, those kind of things are always going to be popular.
What about from the, like, let's take a different decade, like the 50s. Is there stuff that are standards?
I remember when I was first performing, from the 50s, things like Rock Around the Clock and, stuff, Hound Dog, stuff like that. These days, I don't recall a single 50s song being requested.
Really?
Yeah, it's getting a little bit up there. It's
so
more
what
like...
is the decade? Is it 90s? Or is it, what is
a little bit of 70s, like Earth, Wind & Fire. And David, Earth, Wind & Fire was one of the most popular corporate acts until a few years ago.
Right.
It's amazing what a legacy they have. And so for a while, that reflected, people's interests. Nowadays, it's getting more like a little bit of 70s, but more 80s. I don't know why 80s is still so popular. I mean, it's
What's
great.
the biggest 80s song that you get requests for?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, like, let's see, Walk This Way, and I'm blanking out right now. Don't Stop Believin' is a smash huge. I believe that was 80s. Yeah, Journey. And so those songs are still huge. But also, 90s, early 2000s. And people want to hear the hits, the big hits now. You just got to be careful depending on the lyric content, though.
Right. So what are the big hits? What's current today? Like, what do you have on every playlist? Since I know you're out every single night and listening.
Well, current. I mean, rather than current. It can also count as what's gone on in the past few years,
right.
As well. So,
what does current mean?
Well, like 24K, again, Bruno Mars. It hasn't been a number one hit for a couple of years, but it's still a huge smash at every song. So also one way of defining current is really the past, within the past 4 or 5 years.
4 or 5 years, that's current.
Yeah, in my opinion.
Because you have to cross generations too, because it takes the cycle of a song.
Well, and
is
also
different today.
And also these days, when a number one song is a number one song, everybody knows about it.
Well, how do you with the diffusion of media though? How do songs become number one again today? Like, what is the authority?
Well, I think part of it,
turn to.
Look, they'll appear in a lot of different ways. Maybe commercials, movies. Movies will really bring back a song or make a song very big and popular, and then it'll reflect on whatever we listen to today, satellite or radio. But that's a good point. But not many people are listening so much to radio anymore.
What is radio?
But on the other hand, satellite, like Sirius XM, there's a station where it's all current hits. Right. I believe people are listening to that.
Right. And of course, Apple Music and are all programming using AI to figure out what people are listening to. But there's no one DJ that's now, making the hits, as they used to say.
It's going to be interesting when AI really gets incorporated into events, isn't it? With music like holograms or whatever we want to call it. It's going to be fascinating.
AI and music. I think you're going to be able to also use biometrics to test the biometrics of your heartbeat while you're dancing to see which more popular and which isn't popular.
That's incredible.
I mean, that's all coming, and it's all actually here. They're actually doing that now. A lot of people are doing that kind of stuff, and so that the DJ can actually change his music based on the heartbeats of the room.
So they'll be reading it in the moment.
In real time.
That's incredible.
And I think that live music, I don't know if they'll be able to react on the dime that way, but they should be at some point. There'll be a way.
It's a whole nother topic, but the integration of technology, where does it start to take away, in a sense, some of the emotion? I mean, part of me understands strategically, we talked about using that technique to find out what are they responding to. On the other hand, to me, again, you're taking them through a journey. And when I used to be there and choose the songs and all of that, now I've trained people to do that. I want to have peaks and valleys. And so there are going to be moments when I don't necessarily want the songs that's going to get the heart, going like that. Because you want these big ups, you got to have some medium points so that the ups are even these big moments. Right. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let's go into sort of budget areas. Like somebody is requesting live entertainment. What kind of budgets and ranges should they be aware of for different types of acts? What's your rules of thumb? Well, first of all,
it does vary, from geography to geography. Like an act in DC that, let's say, is 15,000 is going to be probably
15,000 people.
Dollars.
Okay.
And it was going to be like 25,000 in New York City. It's a different level.
And what does it get you?
Well, it's just a higher level band as far as the ability.
What are the metrics you think about internally? Like you say, okay, I have a budget, and then you're in your head, you're figuring out, what the sort of the costs are and things like that. Like, what are kind of the things that you think about? Number of pieces, number of orchestral members. I mean, what is your sort of metric to say, okay, I want to book something?
Well, that's one way to look at it. Like, although I have to back up for a minute, generically speaking, I never even talk about the pieces of the band. I mean, eventually it comes up, or they ask, or they see it. There's 3 singers, 4 singers, there's horns, there's no horns. But to me, it's like the power of the band, the Police, with just 3 people.
Yeah. I don't think you'd buy the Police by.
Yeah, or Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
But then there's Earth, Wind and Fire, or Sly and the Family Stone, or how about Parliament Funkadelic that had like 30 people on stage. So to me, it's I don't really talk about pieces, but yes, internally I do have to think about the cost of each. How many pieces are there, and what do I need in terms of sound and backline and all the technical support, the production of it? I personally send out what I call a production manager to my bigger events, where instead of having the band, the leader, be the liaison, I want a completely separate person who's also trained to be the liaison between the client contact and the band, so that the band just does what they do, stays on stage, and just kills it out there. So there's the cost of that, the variances in what kind of band lighting they want. I mean, so yeah,
So is there a rule of thumb? If the band costs X, then you need to know you got a budget X for the lighting and the stage and things like that, or is that?
To me, again, it's such a combination of what's going on in the geography and how many hours are they playing, and like this event I mentioned earlier is going to require a lot of rehearsal on our part. We're going to charge for that, for our time and effort, and all of that.
But are people getting their due though now? Is the market sort of, you don't have to sort of like undercut people. I mean, people get paid for doing great entertainment now.
I believe so.
Yeah. And so that it's not,
if the client understands.
The client understands.
Yeah. There's still the people that just, you're going to lowball. And look, there's a group, I don't want to say the name, but in the DC area, and there's a similar one I know in Atlanta, that they don't even have the same people from week to week. It's just a whole glob of musicians and singers, and it's just a total commodity. And the buyer, I guess they're buying a concept, and it's crazy cheap. And the music is not good. Like within the industry, we know it's not good, and the bands are not tight. But there's a segment of the market that doesn't care.
So, but those is technology, like sort of the people that are buying entertainment online alone. That's a different segment than what the highly curated ones like you guys do.
Yes,
but there are two different things that people don't know what they don't know. Yes. So they think, okay, I can get Well,
and once we educate them, they may not care, and they still might just say, no, just send. I don't care about that. I just want to send me.
Is that a constant sort of challenge in the business? Or is
in a sense, that it's also the bread and butter, those kind of clients, or who call up and, like for me, say, oh, I just want sound connection, and I don't need to I just want them to show up. Great, fine, it is a smaller percentage that let's say understands and desires the curation. But again, do they get it? If they get it, like this client I keep referring back to, they got it. Mm-hmm. And they were hot. They were like, the budget literally went, I guess without saying who the company is, it went from they wanted a band for $10,000, and now they're going to spend in the 50s for this whole event that I'm curating. So they've got to appreciate it, understand it, and realize how it can benefit them.
So let's end on the idea of what is your fantasy booking that you want to do? Like, who do you think would make the greatest entertainment for either a wedding or corporate event? Like,
you mean a particular act?
A particular act, like just fantasize with me. Like, who would you like? Oh my God, I wish those guys were.
Oh, to like work with. I had one of the fantasies come true.
Oh, let's hear about it.
It was Earth, Wind and Fire.
Yeah.
This was about 6 years ago. I was handling a corporate event, and I had one of my acts kind of warm up in a sense for them. And then the main act, they wanted a celebrity act, and in terms of the demographic, it was a little bit older. That was a dream for me. I mean, I got to hang out with Earth, Wind and Fire. I got to speak to some of them. I mean, that was crazy. And then some of them heard my band and complimented me on it. Like, that was a dream. So I already had it. Another one for me personally would be Stevie Wonder. I mean, that to me would be just the bomb, and in terms of current acts, I mentioned Bruno Mars. I love how he kind of has a bit of an old school feel with current, Are
they all doing corporate? I mean, most of those?
Every one of them. There are, even an act like Beyonce is doing, work. doing events for a sultan out in the Middle
like
East that we don't hear about on a little island for 10 people.
What's a couple
They're
million?
all doing it. I mean, everyone is being hired for these events.
And what is the best way for a corporate planner to go to find a celebrity orchestra band? Is it they go through you? Do they go through other agents?
I mean, we do that, but there's also there's people in companies where that's all they do is they deal with celebrity entertainment, and they're like an agent.
The big agents.
Well, the thing is, they're actually called entertainment producers, and then the entertainment producer goes to an agent like CAA, William Morris, to get the acts. But it has to go through this middleman person. The agents don't deal directly with an end user, with a client.
And why is that?
It's been like that forever. It's just the way the business is structured, that they're representing, speakers, musicians, all kinds of talent, motivational speakers, and they're dealing with entertainment producers who are doing all the legwork. There's a lot of legwork.
Where do you fit into the sort of the ecosystem?
So I'm like one of the middle people. If it's for a celebrity act, like the Earth, Wind and Fire piece, where they contact me, we discuss it. We found their budget was hundreds of thousands of dollars, and so that right there narrowed it down to certain kinds of bands that I could pitch to them. But then we had to do. I mean, David, the work was enormous. The way the stage had to be done, and the rider for Earth, Wind and Fire. They have a certain kind of water.
What a rider is.
Yeah, right. The rider are really requirements that any act, even a motivational speaker, has in terms of the type of hotel rooms that they require, the kind of food that they want, the kind of ground transportation, all of that. jets only, nonstop flights only. It's all the details.
Do they ask for the world and then you have to fight back, or do you just have to let them have what they want?
Generally, you have to let them have what they want. However, there could be a few elements in there where it's like, look, can we negotiate this? It's either too costly for my client, or it's too hard for us to get or to manage, or something like that. But generally, the riders are pretty reasonable at this point.
What's the craziest thing you've seen in a rider?
God, the craziest thing. Well, it wasn't really crazy. It was just a surprise to me, a certain kind of water. I think it was Fiji. How do you say that? Fiji water, which it was Earth, Wind and Fire. And I had it, and I was like, wow, this is really good water. It's like smooth, and they know they've been all over the world a million times. Yeah. They want a certain kind of water. It's not technically crazy, but then I understood when I tasted it. Okay, I get it.
Yeah. So you have to the egos of the smaller bands, you have to keep in check.
Oh, you got to definitely be in check. Oh yeah. No, bands will get in a lot of trouble if they demand too much at whatever level they're at that doesn't fit their level.
Yeah. Great. Well, this has been totally interesting. I think anybody that listens to this will have, a couple more points, takeaways, if they want to go into this side of the entertainment business for their events. And so, any final thoughts on advice you give to the people that are planning events that need entertainment?
Well, I think really, again, thinking about the curating aspect of it, and why are these people getting together? Do a deep dive into that. Not just they want lighting. Oh, well, here's lighting choices. No, really get into it. And also, not to be too self-serving, but my show, the Wedding Biz podcast, has amazing. All that we're talking about here is you hear from the best in the business talk about how they do it, how they view it, and of course it includes music and entertainment. But just overall, it's educational, it's inspirational, and
that's
empowering.
why we love listening to podcasts. You learn so much.
We do. And David, I love yours. I recommend. Well, people are already listening to yours too, and what you did on my show was great. So it's really fun that we're
thank you for coming back and having a collaboration.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's really an honor. Thank you.
Well, until next time.
Okay, so that was Andy Kushner of Kushner Entertainment and the podcast, The Wedding Biz. Before we go, I wanted to shout out a quick plug for our final Top 100 list of the year, the Top 100 events in Washington, D.C. This list is always so unique because of the number of press events. So see where favorites like the White House Correspondents' Dinner, the State of the Union, and other interesting political events fall on our rankings. You can also find favorites like the Cherry Blossom Festival and new events like the H Street Festival. So read about those, as well as a new #1 event in the benefits category, which represents so much of DC's social scene. So find that at bizbash.com. Thank you to our producer, Dave Nelson, Claire Hoffman from our editorial team, and to Rebecca Pappas, who oversees audience development. One programming note, we will be taking a holiday break with GatherGeeks, and we'll be back in January. We want to wish a happy holiday to those who are celebrating, and until next time, gather on.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the GatherGeeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter @GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of GatherGeeks. Until then, gather on.